If you're watching this alone at night, look behind you. Just kidding. Let's dive into tonight's nightmare. Stay spooked, AF.
I was 21 when this happened. It was 2017, and at the time, I was working part-time at a gas station a few towns over from where I lived. It was one of those jobs I only planned to keep for a few months, just until I figured out what I wanted to do next. The shifts were usually easy, a lot of ringing up snacks and cigarettes and stuff like that, more so than the occasional person paying for gas and cash. During the day, it was annoying but normal. The nights were different. The nights dragged. The place felt too bright inside and too dark outside, and every customer felt a little stranger. That night, I was working the closing shift by myself, and I still think about it all the time. The store closed at midnight. Around 9 or 10 at night, the phone started ringing. I answered without thinking anything of it. The second I picked up, I heard this weird voice. It was low and drawn out, like someone trying to sound like a killer in a horror movie. It reminded me right away of Ghostface from Scream. It sounded really forced, like someone trying to do an impression, but yet it was still unsettling. The voice asked if I was all alone in the store. I just stayed quiet for a second, then said something sarcastic like, "Yeah, you got me," and then I hung up. I figured it was one of my friends messing with me. I texted the group chat and asked which one of them was calling the store pretending to be a serial killer. They all found it funny and acted confused at first. One of them asked what I was talking about, then another said he was at home. I assumed they were just lying because that would have been the obvious response if they wanted to keep the prank going. About 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. It was that same fake horror movie voice. This time they asked why I hung up. I once again sarcastically said, "Alright, you got me." The voice let out this soft laugh that sounded weirdly real, not playful like I expected. Then it said I shouldn't be rude to people who know where I am. I hung up again, but this time I felt a little off. It was probably still a joke, but there was something about how calm the person sounded that got me. I kept trying to shake it off. Customers were still coming in at that point, enough to keep me distracted. People getting gas, buying beer, and getting lottery tickets. But every time it slowed down, I found myself looking at the phone. It rang a third time around 10:40. I answered, and I immediately regretted it. The voice asked if the store always got this quiet that late. That got under my skin more than I want to admit. I said nothing and hung up. After that, I texted my friends again, this time more seriously. I said it was getting old and asked who was doing it. Again, they all denied it. I started messaging them one by one. It was the same thing. One was with his girlfriend, one sent me a picture from his basement, one was apparently at a friend's house almost half an hour away. At that point, I started getting annoyed instead of scared. I thought maybe they had someone else doing it, but the truth was, even though the caller never said my name, he was saying things that matched what was happening in the store, like how quiet it was. Around 11, the calls started coming closer together. I stopped answering after the fifth one. The phone would ring and I would stare at it and let it stop on its own. Then a minute or two later, it would ring again. That went on for maybe 15 minutes. I started checking the cameras more. There were a few around the outside of the building and a few inside. The store sat by itself off a road that got pretty dead at night. There was a small patch of woods behind one side of the building and an alley-like area where the dumpster was. The outside cameras weren't great. They had blind spots, and the picture at night was grainy. Still, I kept flipping through them, half expecting to catch one of my idiot friends crouched outside laughing. I didn't see anyone, though. Then I started hearing little sounds outside, which at first I told myself was nothing, for example, a tap somewhere. Then what sounded like a light scrape near the sidewall. Then a noise by the back that sounded like someone stepping on loose gravel. It got to a point where I couldn't dismiss it any longer. I texted the group chat again and told them to seriously stop. I even sent a picture of the empty store and wrote that this wasn't funny anymore. They kept denying it. One of my friends actually called me from his normal number and I told him what was happening. He sounded genuinely confused and said he wasn't joking, nor was he involved in any joke. He told me to lock the door early if I had to.
Before we get into the craziest part, drop a comment if you're watching this in the dark. Let's see who's really brave one. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned.
I didn't want to do that unless I really felt I needed to. part of me still thought I was making too much of it. At around 11:40, one last customer came in. I remember the exact sound of the door opening because it made me jump. I looked up and saw just a regular-looking guy at first, maybe late 20s or 30s. Nothing outwardly crazy about him. He wasn't dirty or dressed weird. He just had this blank expression. He didn't say hello. He just walked in and started moving through the aisles. I watched him on the cameras while pretending not to. He took way too long for someone who ended up buying one bag of chips. He kept drifting to different aisles and then stopping. More than once, I saw the top half of his face appear above the shelves while he looked toward the counter. Not in a casual way either. It felt like he was checking on me. I kept thinking maybe he was high, or maybe he was tired, or maybe he was deciding what he wanted. But my stomach had that heavy feeling by then, like my body already knew something was wrong before my brain wanted to admit it. He was in there for at least 8 or 9 minutes. Then he finally came up to the counter with a bag of chips. He still didn't say a word, so I didn't either. I just took the chips and scanned them. When I looked down at the register, everything felt normal for 1 second. Then I looked up and caught him staring directly into my eyes. He held it for maybe 2 seconds. It doesn't sound long, but it was. There was no expression on his face when he did it. Then he looked down and paid. I handed him back the bag, and he turned and walked toward the door. I remember thinking maybe I was overreacting. Maybe he was just a weird guy. But right as he got to the door and pushed it halfway open, he stopped and turned his head back toward me without fully turning his body. His chin was slightly lowered, so his eyes had to look up at me. Then he smiled. I still don't know how to explain that smile without sounding dramatic. It looked like he knew exactly how creepy he looked, and he was doing it on purpose. It made every hair on my body stand up. Then he stepped outside, and instead of walking toward any of the pumps or toward a car, he walked around the side of the building. When he did it, he kept his eyes on me through the glass. He kept that smile too. I just stood there watching him until the angle cut him off. Then I rushed to the camera monitor and followed him there. I saw him round the building and head toward the side where the woods were. Then he disappeared into the blind spot behind the building. He didn't come back out. I waited maybe 10 seconds, then 20, then a minute. He never reappeared. That was enough for me to lock the door early, even though it was a little before midnight. This part might sound dramatic, but I texted my family and my friends and told them that there was a creepy guy outside and I wasn't joking anymore. I said if I stopped replying, that meant something probably happened to me because of him. I rushed through the closing stuff as fast as I could. I barely cleaned anything. I kept checking the cameras over and over, expecting to see him pop back out. Nothing. Midnight hit, and I decided I couldn't stay there any longer. I grabbed my stuff, turned off what I needed to turn off, and went to the front door. I unlocked it and stepped out, and that moment of having to relock it was so tense I couldn't have done it quick enough. Once I did, I took off running to my car. It was parked off to the side of the building. I got most of the way there, and just as I reached it and slowed for half a second, I heard fast footsteps. Not running, but worse somehow, like speed-walking steps slapping the pavement in front of the store. I turned and saw him. It was that guy. He had come from the front corner of the building and was moving toward me and my car fast. I yanked my car door open and threw myself inside. I locked the door and started the engine so fast I almost flooded it. The second the car started, I hit reverse and peeled out of that lot. I looked once in the mirror and saw him standing there in the lights watching me leave. The whole drive home, I was sending voice texts and regular texts to everyone saying I was right, that I knew he was going to come out of nowhere. None of that was a prank anymore. The next day, I texted my boss and told him exactly what happened. I said I wasn't doing overnights anymore. He looked at the footage later, and his response honestly made me even angrier. He got kind of defensive and said the guy looked like a regular customer to him. He said maybe I had just gotten spooked because of the phone calls and connected things that weren't connected. That pissed me off more than I can explain. I was the one there. I was the one getting the calls. I was the one who saw that guy disappear around the building and come speed walking at me out of nowhere when I left. I didn't care if the footage didn't fully capture how it felt because I knew what happened. I quit right after that. I didn't even argue much. I just told him if he thought that was normal, he could work the closing shift himself. I ended that job with attitude, and I was proud of it. Even now, many years later, I still think the caller and that guy who came in were the same person, even if I can't prove it.
Catch you on the next one. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned.